On January 26, 2011, a Philadelphia teacher was found with a knife in her chest and 20 stab wounds. 10 were in her back. Why did the city still write suicide? Ellen Ray Greenberg taught first grade at Juniata Park Academy. She was 27, a Penn State graduate living at Venice Lofts in Manayunk with Samuel Goldberg, an NBC sports producer she met on a blind date. He proposed in June 2010. The wedding was set for August 13, 2011. 4 days before she died, she mailed save-the-date cards. That ordinary week sits under the later paperwork. A school year, a loft, a date already printed. Nothing in those days reads like a planned last day except the blizzard that sent the city home early and left her in the apartment through the afternoon. Snow shut Philadelphia on January 26. Ellen left school and reached the loft about 1:30 p.m. Goldberg later said he was in the building gym, came back and found the swing bar latch fastened from inside. He could not reach her. He forced the latch. On the kitchen floor, he found her with a 10-inch knife in her chest. He called 911 at 6:33 p.m. and told the dispatcher she had stabbed herself, that she had fallen on a knife. Pronouncement came at 6:40. Those minutes of official language, suicide spoken before an autopsy, sit at the start of every later fight about this file. The autopsy counted 20 stabs. 10 were at the back of the head and right neck, some shallow, 2 about 3 inches deep, including a scalp gash. 8 crossed the front torso, including the chest wound that held the knife. Later 2025 city report called many stabs hesitation marks and said no defensive injuries were identified. The 2011 record already listed 11 bruises in different stages, including a dark mark on the upper right arm. Independent reviewers later argued a person cannot keep stabbing after a cranial nerve injury. The city's later language says she could. That disagreement is the medical core of the case. On January 27, the Philadelphia Medical Examiner's Office ruled homicide. The next day, police said the death had not been ruled homicide. 2 weeks later, after talks with law enforcement, the examiner's office changed the manner to suicide. The apartment was cleaned on the 27th with police permission. Goldberg's uncle, attorney James Schwartzman, took laptops, phones, and cards. A warrant later pulled those devices back. Chain of custody became its own exhibit. The reversal from homicide to suicide is the administrative fact families keep citing, and the fact police treat as settled science. When the Attorney General took the case in 2018 over a Philadelphia conflict, the office later said internet searches on Ellen's computer pointed to suicide and closed the investigation in 2019. The family answered that Schwartzman had held the devices, breaking custody, before police received them. An earlier Philadelphia Regional Computer Forensics Laboratory exam, summarized internally, said keyword searches for suicide information found nothing remarkable. Those two computer stories cannot both be the whole truth without explaining the gap. In 2024, Chester County said the evidence did not meet a charging burden and marked the case inactive. In March 2019, the Philadelphia Inquirer put the contradictions on page 1. Cyril Wecht reviewed the materials and called the death strongly suspicious of homicide. Henry Lee said the wounds and bloodstain patterns were consistent with a homicide scene. Wayne Ross, hired by the family, wrote that a wound into cranial nerves would have produced immediate dysfunction. The original report cited neuropathologist Lucy Rourke Adams as finding no spinal cord defect. Years later, she told reporters she had no recollection of the case, and journalists found no invoice for that consult. The city's science and the family's science are not looking at the same page. In February 2025, as a civil jury was being picked, Philadelphia settled. The city paid the parents $650 and promised a medical re-examination of manner of death. In October 2025, the city's top pathologist issued a report that kept suicide. Money moved. The label did not. For a family that wanted the word homicide restored, a payout without a changed manner is a draw that still reads suicide on the death certificate. For the city, it is a closed scientific question with a check attached. The public is left holding both the check and the original 20 wound count. In December 2025, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania opened a federal investigation into whether municipal agencies mishandled or covered up the 2011 death investigation, including possible civil rights issues. In January 2026, grand jury subpoenas went to the Philadelphia Police Department and other local agencies. By spring, FBI agents and federal prosecutors were interviewing witnesses around the forensic reviews. That is not a state murder charge against Samuel Goldberg. It is a second government looking at the first government's paperwork. The suicide ruling remains the official manner of death while that review runs. Replay the first hour without trailer adjectives. A locked interior latch. A fiancé's gym-to-door timeline. A dispatcher told she stabbed herself. An examiner who wrote homicide on January 27th. Then suicide 2 weeks later after talking to police. A kitchen professionally cleaned the next day. Electronics that left the scene in a relative's hands before a warrant. Later experts who would not sign the suicide story, and a city that paid 6 figures in 2025 without changing the word on the certificate. Each item is sourced. None of them alone is a courtroom ending. Together they are why this death will not stay in the suicide column without argument. Manner of death is an administrative box. Homicide, suicide, accident, undetermined. Philadelphia has used 2 of those boxes on the same woman, first homicide on January 27th, then suicide after police discussions. The 2025 federal file asks whether the box was honest. Until that review finishes, the public record still says suicide next to 20 stab wounds and a knife left in the chest. That sentence is why the case travels. It is also why a careful telling has to keep the city's current ruling in the same frame as the first homicide stamp, not pretend either one disappeared from the file. Ellen Greenberg's death certificate still carries a word her parents have spent years trying to move. 20 wounds, 10 of them in the back and neck, an inside swing bar latch, a city check for $650,000. A federal file opened after the check, with subpoenas into 2026. This documentary does not replace a grand jury. It lays the stamps in chronological order and leaves the unproven claims out. If you want the next case built the same way, documents first, and no invented ending, stay with that rule. Subscribe if you want the next case broken down the same way.